I am so sad by the double standard by which men are treated over the last 20 or 30 years. When men have the ultimate deficit, that is, they die 5 years younger than women, and they die earlier of 9 of the top 10 causes of death, you would think that gender-specific medical research and outreach would be on men. And yet all we see are Coke cans emblazoned with women in heart disease, run of the run for breast cancer. And a few years ago I did a search of what's called PubMed, which indexes 3,000 medical journals, the major medical journals, and I searched it over its entire lifespan, which is 60 years of research. And I searched on the term men's health, and then I searched on the term women's health. And there were 19 times as many results for women's health. Surprising, but true. And yet, when women have a, quote, deficit in less central areas than whether you're dying earlier, whether you're getting cancer or heart attack earlier, let's say women are, quote, underrepresented in engineering or in other STEM fields, there have literally been billions of dollars to redress what recent research is showing may be simply preferences and or biological differences between the genders. There are fewer women who are interested and or have the ability, natural or environmental, and I don't want to get too controversial, but even there's a number of feminist researchers at prestigious universities that are saying that at least a significant component of the difference between the genders' interest and aptitudes in science and technology really has at least a partial biological basis, even though what I just said got the president of Harvard, Lawrence Summers, into tremendous trouble. The double standard continues in the way in which men are treated relative to women in the media. There are endless amounts of free publicity given for women's causes. Organizations like AAUW, the American Association of University Women, the National Organization for Women, Catalyst, etc., getting literally, probably, I don't want to say billions, although it could be, a huge amounts of free publicity, free news stories, better than advertisements for women's causes. And they lobbied and got a very heavily funded White House Council on women and girls. Whereas when I think it's about 35 of the leading, most well-regarded men in the, quote, men's movement, and I am one of them. Not that I'm that well-regarded, but I'm certainly one of the people who petitioned thoroughly and thoughtfully for over a multiple-year period under the leadership of Warren Farrell to try to get a White House Council for men and boys. It got turned down, even though men not only live shorter, but they really are treated terribly in the media. Boys are put on Ritalin for their inability to sit still all day in schools that are largely female-centric, where boys tend to be much more active. And the curriculum has been really feminized, ever more cooperative, collaborative learning rather than competition, which has its place, but it seems to have lost its place in the school curriculum. Ever more of what is read are about female heroes and evil men, from Hitler to Timothy McVeigh, and nobody seems to care. Women now represent almost 60% of the college graduates, and nobody seems to care that men only are 40%. When it was reversed and men were getting most of the degrees back in the 60s, there was massive redress. Why? Why are men still the only ones required to register for the draft. And when Hillary was asked about that, she who's supposedly the big advocate for fairness, she just skirted the question. It was Warren Farrell who called men the disposable sex, with good reason. Not only did 97% of the deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan occur to men, but 93% of all the workplace deaths occur to men, but nobody seems to care. And when there are stories about widows and widowers, there are 4 widows for every widow. And yet if you look at most of the articles about widows and widowers, you don't hear anything about how to reduce the ratio to fairness. We hear about, well, what can we do for women because there are more widows. And the colleges, to the extent that there are men's studies programs, they're run by feminists who try to argue how inferior men are. Whereas there are many more and many much more heavily funded women's studies programs called gender studies programs, but really are women's studies programs, whose job is to, in the end, intentionally or inadvertently, I think intentionally, empower women, too often at male expense. And dare a male advocate for that males are not doing so well, he gets shunted down with phrases like male privilege, and you're a sexist and you don't get it. And the new intersectionalism, which I won't even go into because it's a little off topic. But everything that's not white male is undeserved. That does bring me to my final point, deservedness. Think to what men have contributed. Not just in wars, fighting the Nazis in World War II, or inventing so many of the things that make us comfortable, including, by the way, the birth control pill. But everything from the chair I'm sitting on, the webcam I'm looking at, the room I'm in, the home that got built, the internet that we're watching was produced predominantly by men. Musicians, from Beethoven to Basie to Bono. Filmmakers like Steven Spielberg. And yet men, if you watch TV, any kid growing up today, watching TV, starting very early at the cartoon level, you're going to, if you watch cartoons or commercials, you'll disproportionately see males, especially white males, being shown the way by spunky, smart women, females. Disproportionately males, especially white males, are so often portrayed as either stupid, sleazy, or otherwise clueless. If it were reversed, and I felt that women really were the oppressed group, I'd be fighting for them. But even that statistic that the Obama administration and the media trumpets mindlessly, that women earn 79 cents on the dollar compared to men, is totally bogus. When you really compare apples with apples, the same work, the same level of expertise, the same hours per week, there really is essentially no pay gap. And I invite you, for example, Google Christina Hoff Sommers, who's written a lot about this and done videos about this. But nobody seems to care. I care really, you may not believe me. I'm a male talk advocating for males here. But I am obsessed, maybe too much so, with fairness and with making the world better. And I think a world in which males are not treated according to their merit or their need, but primarily or disproportionately as a whipping boy to be attacked so that women can be made to feel better about themselves and to improve the lot of women, it just seems like a cosmic injustice and bad for society. One guy's opinion. I'm Marty Nemko.